It was supposed to be just another school day, the kind where the hallways echoed with laughter, sneaker squeaks, and the low murmur of last-minute homework panic. No one could have predicted that the moment a pair of scissors snipped through tightly coiled, beautifully maintained black curls, the entire school would hold its breath. The girl everyone thought was quiet, polite, invisible, was about to show the world who she truly was. Tiana Rivers had never liked attention. She wasn't shy, but she wasn't the type to force her way into the spotlight either. She walked with quiet confidence, her head held high, always dressed neatly and always minding her business. Her grades were sharp, her focus sharper. She kept to herself, mostly because she'd learned early on that not everyone deserved to know her. Not everyone would understand the fire that lived behind her calm eyes. What most people didn't know was that Tiana had been training in martial arts since she was 7. Her grandmother had enrolled her after a boy in 2nd grade had tried to push her off a swing. Not because you need to fight, her grandmother had said, but because you need to know your own strength. Over the years, Tiana became what her instructors called a silent storm, controlled, disciplined, ruthless when needed, but only if pushed. And unfortunately, that day, someone did push. Her name was Kelsey. The kind of girl who thought the world was her mirror, and everyone else was just a background character. Blonde, loud, and always surrounded by a flock of giggling followers who hung on every cruel word she spat. Kelsey wasn't just a bully, she was a professional at it. She had an art for humiliation, knowing just how to sting with her insults, always with that smug, syrupy smile. She didn't like Tiana. Maybe it was because Tiana didn't react the way other students did. Maybe it was because no matter how hard Kelsey tried to get under her skin, Tiana stayed calm, unbothered. And nothing infuriates a bully more than being ignored. So, Kelsey decided to go one step further. It happened in the hallway just before 2nd period. Tiana had been walking toward her locker, her earbuds in, her mind already on her chemistry test. Kelsey had been waiting. The hallway was oddly quiet for a Tuesday morning, just a few students lingering. No one expected it when Kelsey suddenly stepped behind Tiana, yanked out one earbud, and in one quick, aggressive move, took a pair of silver scissors from her sleeve and snipped. Gasps filled the corridor. Someone even dropped their books. A thick lock of Tiana's hair floated to the ground. There was a moment, a heartbeat of silence. Tiana stood completely still. Her hand slowly reached up to the side of her head, fingers touching the uneven, jagged spot where her curls used to be. She looked down. The hair was just lying there like it had been discarded, like it meant nothing. Kelsey was laughing. Loud, mocking. One of her friends had even pulled out a phone. "Oops," Kelsey said, twirling the scissors in her fingers. "I thought you needed a makeover." Tiana didn't say a word. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked up, her eyes locking with Kelsey's. Something shifted in the air, a tension that wasn't loud or violent, just deadly calm, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. But she didn't move. Not yet. The principal was called, teachers rushed over, everyone expected a fight. But Tiana surprised them again. She handed over the broken piece of her pride, the lock of her hair, to the guidance counselor and walked away, straight to the girls' restroom. She didn't slam the door, she didn't even flinch. Kelsey smirked, thinking she'd won. That she'd humiliated the quiet girl into silence. But what Kelsey didn't know was that by cutting Tiana's hair, by crossing that line, she had made a grave mistake. Because Tiana wasn't just a quiet girl. She wasn't just a good student. She was a fighter, and she wasn't going to fight with fists, at least not yet. She had something much more powerful: purpose. While rumors buzzed through the school like wildfire, Tiana stood alone in front of the mirror, slowly tying back the uneven remains of her hair with a calm, practiced hand. She didn't cry, she focused. She had faced worse, and she had come back stronger every time. This wasn't going to break her. This was going to wake her up. Meanwhile, across town, another story was unfolding. 17-year-old Jamal was on A crowded bus, headed home from his part-time job at the grocery store. His uniform shirt was wrinkled and his legs ached from standing all day, but he didn't complain. He never did. Jamal was raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs, and he knew what it meant to struggle with dignity. That afternoon, as he boarded the bus, he saw a pregnant woman standing near the front, her hands gripping the pole tightly as the vehicle jerked forward. Without hesitation, Jamal stood up. "Ma'am," he said gently, motioning to his seat. "Please take this." She hesitated for a second, clearly moved by the gesture. "Thank you," she whispered, easing into the seat with a sigh of relief. "You didn't have to do that." He just smiled. "It's nothing. You look like you need it more than I do." But it wasn't nothing. As the bus continued its route, the woman reached into her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper and passed it to Jamal. "Please read this later," she said softly. "And keep it safe." Confused, Jamal nodded and slipped the note into his pocket. He wouldn't open it until much later. And when he did, everything changed. Not just for him, but for everyone around him. Back at school, the news of what Kelsey had done to Tiana spread quickly. Social media posts were already circulating. Some people laughed, some were outraged, but very few understood what was coming next, because Tiana wasn't done, not by a long shot. She walked back into school. The next day, not with her head down, but higher than ever before. No makeup to hide her pain, no hoodie to cover her hair, just raw strength, and a new resolve. This wasn't just about hair anymore, it was about dignity, about identity, about fighting back without laying a single hand. But make no mistake, if it came to that, Kelsey wasn't ready for what she'd unleashed. Tiana had spent her entire life learning how to defend herself. And now, she would teach Kelsey, and everyone watching, exactly who she was. But just when the pressure started to build, when Tiana was preparing for a confrontation far deeper than a schoolyard fight, Jamal would reappear in the story, his note, her truth, their pasts, somehow tangled in a way neither of them expected. And as the final bell rang on Friday, with tension thick in the air and Kelsey still smirking from across the cafeteria, no, one could predict what would happen next, because sometimes the quiet ones carry storms inside them. And when those storms break, the world changes. Just before the confrontation began, before the truth was revealed, before the note was opened and the names were spoken out loud, Tiana paused. She looked straight ahead, calm as ever. And then, everything stopped. To be continued. The moment froze, not in reality, but in the tension building inside Tiana's chest. Her fingers curled slightly into fists at her sides, but her face stayed neutral. She stood tall in the cafeteria, her eyes locked on Kelsey, who was laughing with her group like nothing had happened. Like cutting off someone's hair was just another joke, another prank, another mark of her control. But Kelsey didn't see the look in Tiana's eyes. She didn't notice how quiet the room had gotten, how certain students watched with nervous anticipation, their whispers low and curious. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming. They just didn't know what. Tiana wasn't the type to fight in public. She didn't want to give anyone a reason to label her angry or aggressive, the way they always did with black girls who defended themselves. But she also wasn't going to let this pass. Not this time. Not when her hair, the crown she took care of every single day, was taken from her without permission, without thought, like it was worthless. As she walked past Kelsey's table, her shoulders brushing just close enough to be felt, Kelsey stopped laughing. For a second, her smirk wavered. Not out of fear, but confusion. It was as if she suddenly realized that Tiana wasn't going to cry in the bathroom or beg the principal for punishment. No, Tiana was planning something far worse. Something quiet, sharp, and calculated. But the confrontation didn't come that day. Instead, Tiana walked to the far side of the cafeteria and sat at an empty table. She opened her notebook, pulled out a pen, and began writing. Page after page. Not poetry, not a diary, but a plan, a statement. She had always believed in words before fists. Now those words were going to make noise. Meanwhile, across town, Jamal finally sat down on his bed after a long day. His shoes were off, his socks half hanging from tired feet. The folded note the pregnant woman had given him still sat untouched on his desk. He'd meant to read it hours ago, but something about it felt too strange, too serious. It wasn't just a thank you. He could feel it. He reached over, picked it up, and slowly opened the fold. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned even. It read, "Dear Jamal, you don't know me, but I know your story. I've been looking for you for a long time. Your kindness today reminded me of someone I once lost. Please, don't throw this away. Inside this letter is a name and an address. Go there, ask for Rena. You'll understand everything then." He blinked, confused. There was no last name, no phone number, just Rena, and an address to a part of town he rarely went. He reread it, looking for some clue. Who was this woman, and how did she know him? He folded the paper again and stared at the ceiling. It was too late to go out now, and part of him didn't want to believe the note meant anything at all. But another part, deeper, quieter, told him this wasn't random. Somehow, this was connected to something bigger. Back at school, Tiana was still writing. Her notebook had become her outlet, each page filled with thoughts, pieces of memories, and stories she was finally ready to speak out loud. She wrote about being followed in stores, about teachers who smiled to her face but whispered her name when grading papers, about classmates who touched her hair without asking, who laughed when she spoke up, who assumed she was too sensitive when she pulled away. But she didn't write from a place of pity. She wrote from power, from truth. Later that afternoon, she met her martial arts instructor after school. The dojo was quiet, dimly lit with soft white lights, the smell of sweat and floor mats familiar and grounding. Sensei Carter had trained her for years, and he noticed right away that something was off. "What happened?" he asked gently. Tiana hesitated, then removed the hair tie and let the uneven cut show. His eyes widened just a little, but he didn't. "Speak right away, she cut it," Tiana said simply. "Kelsey." Sensei Carter's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Did you hit her?" "No. Do you want to?" She nodded. "Will you?" "No," she said, her voice low. "But I need to do something." He nodded. "Good. Then let's begin." She trained harder than ever that evening. Every punch, every kick was sharper, controlled, focused. Like she was channeling every humiliation, every insult, every moment of silence she'd been forced to swallow into something new. And still, back in his room, Jamal couldn't stop thinking about the note. That one name, Rena. He pulled up a map on his phone and searched the address. It led to a small, quiet house in a neighborhood he remembered passing as a kid. He stared at the screen for a long time. What would he even say when he got there? "I'm the kid from the bus. Someone told me to find you." It sounded ridiculous. Still, curiosity tugged at him. He didn't know that the story behind that name would tie him to something far more personal than he ever imagined. That Rena wasn't just a stranger, that her connection ran deeper than blood. The next morning, the school buzzed with gossip again. Someone had posted a video of the haircutting incident on TikTok. It had already gotten thousands of views. Most people thought it was fake. Others called it bullying. Some laughed. But no one could ignore it anymore. Teachers were panicking. The administration called Tiana into the office. They offered apologies, promises of action, detention slips for Kelsey. But to Tiana, it all felt too little, too late. She didn't want punishment, she wanted change, and she was going to make it happen, with or without their help. By lunchtime, everyone was whispering about what Tiana might do. Rumors floated. Some said she was organizing a protest. Others claimed she was writing a speech to deliver at the next assembly. A few even thought she was preparing to transfer schools. But no one knew for sure. Tiana kept her movements quiet. She watched. She listened. And when Kelsey passed her in the hallway, flipping her straight blonde hair with fake confidence, Tiana didn't even blink, because she already knew how this story would end. Just not yet. Because behind every silent storm is a moment of reckoning. And that moment was coming. Fast. By the next week, the video of Kelsey cutting Tiana's hair had gone viral, not just in their school, but across local communities online. Some people didn't believe it was real. Others thought it was staged. But most were furious, especially when they saw that the school had only given Kelsey a few days of suspension. Tiana didn't speak much in those days. She didn't need to. The silence around her grew louder than any outburst could have. People watched her in the hallways, not out of pity, but something closer to respect. Even the teachers acted differently now. They gave her space. Some looked guilty, some unsure, but Tiana stayed steady. She had her focus set on something bigger than gossip and hallway stares. In the shadows of that growing tension, another story was unfolding. Jamal stood outside the small house listed in the note. It was early evening, the sun low behind the trees casting long shadows on the sidewalk. He hesitated before knocking. He had no idea what to expect. The curtains were drawn, but a light flickered from inside. Finally, he took a deep breath and knocked twice. The door creaked open slowly, and a woman appeared, maybe in her late 60s, tall and thin with silver-streaked braids and eyes that seemed to know more than she ever said. She looked at Jamal for a long moment. "You must be the boy from the bus," she said. Jamal blinked. "Yes, I think so. Are you Rena?" "I am," she said, opening the door wider. "Come in." The inside of her home was warm but modest. Books lined the shelves, old photos sat in dusty frames, and the smell of ginger tea filled the air. Jamal sat on the edge of a soft brown couch as Rena poured 2 cups and placed one in front of him. For a while, they sat in silence. "I knew your mother," Rena said finally. Jamal's heart skipped. "My mother?" "She was like you," Rena continued softly. "Kind, quiet strength. She saved my life once when I was younger than you are now. We lost touch, until I saw your face in a photo she carried for years." Jamal's throat tightened. His mother had passed when he was 10. He had only a few memories of her smile, her laugh, but he'd never known much about her life before him. "She always said you'd do something great," Rena added. "But the world isn't always kind to young black men who carry quiet power. Sometimes you have to learn how to use it." Carefully, Jamal swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "Why now? Why the letter?" "Because I saw how you gave your seat to that woman," she said, her eyes serious now. "That wasn't just kindness. That was instinct, leadership. And someone like you shouldn't walk through this world alone." Back at school, Kelsey was starting to feel the weight of what she'd done. Not because she truly regretted it, but because her world was starting to crack. Her social media followers were turning. Some unfollowed her completely. Others left. Harsh comments. Even her closest friends had started distancing themselves. It wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't a joke. And she didn't know how to fix it. She tried to approach Tiana once by the lockers. Her voice was low, unsure. "Hey, I didn't mean to. I didn't think it would be that big a deal." Tiana didn't even look at her. She closed her locker slowly and walked away, leaving Kelsey standing there like a ghost of her own popularity. But the real conflict wasn't between the two girls. It was between truth and silence, between what people wanted to see and what was really there. Because Tiana had been working with a few trusted classmates quietly. One of them, Layla, was part of the student council. Another, Aaron, wrote for the school newspaper. Together, they started gathering stories. Other students who had been bullied or ignored or silenced. They wrote it all down. They weren't just exposing one haircut incident. They were building a case for a broken system. And the principal, Mr. Henley, was feeling the pressure. Emails poured in from parents, community leaders, even reporters asking for statements. He called Tiana into his office again, hoping to calm things before they got worse. "Tiana, we understand what you went through was unacceptable," he said, forcing a professional smile. "But if you escalate this further, it could damage the school's reputation." Tiana raised an eyebrow. "You mean if I speak up, I'm the problem?" Mr. Henley shifted uncomfortably. I just think we should handle this quietly, for everyone's benefit. I already tried quiet, she said, standing, and no one listened. Meanwhile, Jamal continued to visit Raina after school. Each time she told him more about his mother's past, how she'd helped young kids in the neighborhood stay out of trouble, how she once led a sit-in when a local business refused to hire anyone black, how she stood up even when it cost her. Everything. Rena showed him old notebooks, letters, newspaper clippings. She said his mother had always wanted to pass them to her son someday, but never got the chance. Now Jamal read every word, slowly building a picture of who he came from, and with each visit, something in Jamal began to change. Not loud, not sudden, just deeper, stronger. He started volunteering after school at a nearby center Rena helped run. At first, just sweeping floors, then tutoring younger students. People noticed. His teachers saw the shift too. Jamal walked taller now, spoke clearer. But even as his own story grew, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl from the video. He hadn't known her name at the time, but he recognized her now. Tiana. He had seen her in the halls before. Quiet, serious, always focused. Thought about reaching out just to talk, to let her know he understood what it felt like to be underestimated, to be pushed aside. But he didn't want to seem like he was stepping in just because she'd gone viral. Still, something told him their paths were meant to cross. Back at school, the tension reached new levels. Students wore black in silent protest one day. Teachers were split. Some supported them, others threatened detention. Kelsey stopped coming to school altogether for a few days, and in the middle of it all, Tiana stood at the edge of something huge. Her notebook was full now. Her voice was stronger than ever. She had a plan, one that would make people see. Not just what had happened to her, but what had been happening for years. She just needed one more piece to fall into place, one more step before everything changed. But no one, not even Tiana, knew that what was coming next would shake the entire school to its core, because buried in all the whispers and tension, someone had been watching, someone with their own story, and they weren't ready to stay silent anymore. The air in the school felt different, tighter, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting. It wasn't just about Tiana anymore. It was about all of them. What started as a cruel moment caught on camera had peeled back a layer of silence that had lived in those hallways for years. People began to talk, really talk, about the bullying, the favoritism, the way the school had looked, the other way when it was the wrong kid being hurt. And now all that talking was turning into something bigger. The student council, pressured by the students and quietly encouraged by Layla, announced a town hall meeting would be held in the gym. For healing, they said in the flyer. For transparency. But no one expected healing. Everyone expected fire. Teachers whispered in the break room. Some wanted to cancel it altogether, afraid of what might be said. Others, tired of seeing kids hurt and dismissed, told their students to speak freely. No one knew how it would play out. They only knew that when Tiana stepped onto that gym stage, things wouldn't be the same afterward. But before that moment came, something else began to stir. Jamal had finally worked up the courage to speak to Tiana. He caught her after school, just as she was leaving the library with her backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in. He didn't know exactly what he was going to say, only that it mattered. "Hey!" he called out. She paused and looked back, pulling out one earbud. "Hi? I'm Jamal. From the bus, a while ago," he said, feeling clumsy. "The one who gave up the seat for that lady." A flicker of recognition passed over her face. "Oh, yeah, I remember. That video went everywhere." He nodded, then hesitated. "I saw what happened to you, with Kelsey. I just wanted to say, what you're doing now, it matters. I think a lot of us needed someone to stand up first." Tiana studied him for a moment. She wasn't used to people like Jamal reaching out. Most stayed in their lanes, especially in a school like theirs, where invisible lines divided everything, who spoke to who mattered, who didn't. "Thanks," she said quietly. "It hasn't been easy. "I know," he said, and for the first time she believed he really did. They walked together for a bit, and Jamal told her about Rena, about the letters, about how his mother had been fighting battles before either of them were even born. And as they walked, something unspoken passed between them, a kind of respect, a sense of shared purpose. But while they found strength in connection, Kelsey was falling deeper into isolation. Her parents had started getting calls, first from the school, then from other parents. Her mother's job had even been contacted by a journalist asking about the incident. It was no longer a private mess, it was public now, real. And Kelsey was cracking under the pressure. She tried to talk to her father, but he told her, "You brought this on yourself." Her mother didn't say much at all, just sighed a lot and stared out windows. Kelsey thought about deleting her accounts, running from it all. But something kept her tied to the wreckage. Pride, maybe, or guilt she didn't know how to process. Still, she showed up to school the day of the town hall. And even though she sat near the back, she couldn't look away when Tiana stepped onto the stage. The gym was packed. Parents, teachers, local community leaders. Even a reporter from a local news blog had come, her camera pointed steady. Tiana took the mic with steady hands. She wasn't nervous. Not anymore. "My name is Tiana," she began, her voice firm. "And I've gone to this school for 3 years. In those years, I've seen students bullied, ignored, disrespected, not just by other kids, but by adults who were supposed to protect us. I was told to be quiet, told to let it go, but I can't anymore, because what happened to me isn't just about me." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. Many were silent, hanging on her every word, but others shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm building. She continued, reading letters from other students. Stories of being mocked for how they looked, punished for speaking out, ignored when they asked for help. One letter was from a boy who'd dropped out the year before, citing repeated harassment and zero support. Another from a girl who was told her natural hair was too distracting. Each word hit harder than the last. And when she finished, the gym sat in stunned silence. Then someone stood. "Layla, I have more," she said, lifting a folder. "We've collected over 40 student testimonies. We've emailed them to the school board and our local newspaper." Murmurs rippled across the room. Mr. Henley shifted in his seat, visibly sweating now. The school counselor looked down, ashamed. Parents whispered furiously among themselves. But Tiana didn't stop there. She motioned to Aaron, who pulled up a projector. On the screen, a slideshow began. Clips of the viral video, screenshots of the school's handbook, emails showing complaints that had been ignored, side-by-side comparisons of how different students were punished for the same offenses. The truth was no longer hiding. It was up there for everyone to see, bold and undeniable. And just when the tension couldn't get any higher, a voice broke, through from the back of the room. "You think you're some kind of hero?" It was Kelsey standing now. Her voice trembled, not from anger but something closer to desperation. "You don't even know me. You're making me the villain in a story you already decided." All heads turned. Some gasped. Others froze. Tiana's gaze didn't falter. "You made yourself the villain when you cut my hair," she said, calm but clear. "You didn't care how it would affect me. You just laughed. And now you want to rewrite the story because it's uncomfortable for you to face what you did." Kelsey looked around, as if someone might step in, save her, explain it all away. But no one moved. Even her former friends sat frozen, watching the girl who once ruled the school try to stand in a space she no longer controlled. Jamal stepped forward, not to confront, but to speak. "This isn't about revenge," he said, his voice low but strong. "It's about accountability, about change. If you really want to be understood, start by listening. That's what Tiana's asking for." Kelsey blinked rapidly, jaw tight, but she didn't say another word. The silence that followed was heavier than anything spoken. It wasn't the end of the story. Not yet, but it was the edge of something big. A moment right before the fall, or the rise, And just outside the gym, unseen by everyone inside, someone was making a call, a voice message. It was to a local school. "Board member, you need to see this for yourself," the voice said. "This story is going to blow up, and you've been warned before. If you don't act now, it won't just be your reputation that burns." Whatever happened next wasn't just going to change the school. It was going to change everything.